The psychiatric hospital in Sydney, Australia, is renowned not only for its modern healthcare system but also for its advanced treatment methods, always praised as the place offering the best care for patients with severe psychological issues. However, behind its white walls and vast hallways, few know that inside lies a system full of dark secrets that even outsiders could never imagine. This is where many patients, especially young ones like Noah Adams, face not only the torment of psychological pain but also the abuse of power by those who should be their protectors. Noah Adams, a 16-year-old boy, was brought to the hospital by his family after a serious family tragedy. His mother died in an accident, leaving Noah with an unbearable sorrow. Depression weighed heavily on his mind, and in an attempt to seek help, his father brought him to this hospital, hoping it would be a place of salvation. But Noah could never have known that this would only mark the beginning of another nightmare, one that was nowhere to be found in any treatment plan. Day by day, Noah faced painful psychological therapies, long conversations with doctors he couldn't connect with. But what terrified him most were the dark nights when the hospital fell silent. And it was then that those in power exploited their authority to fulfill their dark desires. One of them, with the benign appearance of a psychologist, took advantage of Noah's weakness and vulnerability, causing him to lose track of the line between salvation and brutality. Noah became one of the nameless victims of this system, where patients like him not only suffered from mental pain but also had to face dangerous manipulation from those in power. He felt isolated, abandoned in a world he couldn't escape from. As the days passed, Noah gradually became a ghost within the hospital, a broken and lost soul, waiting for a release that might never come. By a random chance, a whisper in the dark, Noah found the only light in his grim world. Another patient, someone he trusted, who had witnessed what he had endured. But could there be an escape for victims like Noah, or would it all be nothing more than empty promises swallowed up by the terrifying silence of this hospital? On his first day at the hospital, Noah Adams felt as if his heart was being crushed. He had never imagined that this place would make him feel like a rat caught in a trap. After the devastating family tragedy, he was admitted to this psychiatric hospital, hoping to find solace and healing through treatment. But as soon as he stepped through the hospital doors, he realized he was trapped in a completely different world from what he had ever known. The white walls, the thin curtains hanging on the windows, and the soft padded chairs seemed meaningless to him now. For beneath that perfect exterior lay a terrifying world, where those who were supposed to protect him were the very enemies he feared most. Noah's feelings were a mix of fear and confusion. He could sense the presence of watchful eyes in every hidden corner, from the dark hallways to the unfamiliar labs he had never been properly explained. Dr. Simon Hayes, the hospital director, was the first person Noah met when he arrived. A middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp, cold eyes, Dr. Hayes appeared friendly and always smiled when interacting with patients. But each time Noah looked into his eyes, he felt something was off. That smile seemed like a mask, hiding a coldness beneath it, as though he was observing Noah not as a patient in need of treatment, but as prey to be controlled. Director Hayes held absolute power in this hospital, and Noah soon realized that every decision within its walls was in his hands. But Noah's fear didn't stop there. Dr. Alexander Finch, one of the doctors treating him, was the next person to make him feel like he had fallen into an inescapable nightmare. Dr. Finch had a gentle demeanor, with a warm smile and soft-spoken words, but during their treatment sessions, Noah noticed a strange difference in how he was treated. Every time Finch asked him to do tests or engage in psychological conversations, Noah felt as though he was being forced into a game whose rules he didn't understand. The doctor's caring gestures began to feel strange, and Noah sensed a lack of respect, as though Finch were exploiting his vulnerability. One afternoon, as Noah sat alone in his room, trying to regain some calm, Dr. Finch unexpectedly walked in. He couldn't remember the exact details, but the feeling of tension lingered in his mind. Finch stood closer than usual in an overly familiar manner, as if there was no boundary between doctor and patient. Noah felt that something dangerous was hidden behind each of his movements, and Finch's eyes, though still gentle, were filled with insinuations, as if he was monitoring Noah's every reaction. In that moment, Noah realized that he was being manipulated, ruthlessly exploited. It felt like a slow burning fire inside him, but he couldn't utter a word. It was a feeling of utter helplessness. He tried to pull back, to distance himself from Finch, but the doctor kept advancing, his hand unnecessarily placed on Noah's shoulder. The sensation of being threatened and controlled left him breathless. He wanted to scream, to run away, but he was bound by the fear that no one would believe him. Noah couldn't stop feeling the threat in the air, especially whenever Director Hayes appeared. Every time he entered a room, his gaze on Noah felt like he was controlling everything. The feeling of being surveilled and manipulated seemed to grow stronger. It wasn't just the psychological treatments, it was the moments when Hayes sat close to him, the brief exchanges that Noah felt weren't meant to help him, but to probe him. Noah felt like a pawn in the hands of these men, those who should have been caring for and protecting him, but instead exploited his weakness. As time passed, Noah became more aware of the strange and suspicious actions of Director Hayes and Dr. Finch. Though he didn't have the strength to fight back, what he was enduring slowly formed into a growing fear. The other doctors and medical staff at the hospital were no help. Whenever he tried to speak up about what he had gone through, they dismissed it as symptoms of his psychological condition, hallucinations caused by depression. Noah began to feel trapped in a vicious cycle, where he was the only one who could see the truth, but no one believed him. It seemed like there was no way out, no way to prove that he was being manipulated and abused. Each day passed in loneliness and despair, and his mental state worsened. Would Noah be able to escape the shadows of these manipulators, or would he forever be crushed by the dark secrets of this hospital? Only time would tell. After a month of treatment, Noah returned home in a condition worse than ever. His eyes had lost the innocent gleam they once had as a 16-year-old child. Instead, they now reflected a sadness, confusion, and despair that words couldn't express. He was no longer the hopeful and energetic boy he once was. Now he was nothing more than a ghost, carrying deep wounds that could never heal. The promises of healing from the hospital had now turned into empty words, lies that never came true. Noah had tried to remain silent, hoping that everything would end once he returned home. But the pain inside him grew louder, impossible to hide. He decided that this time he would speak the truth. At first, when he opened his mouth, only silence followed. Then came the disbelief. "What are you talking about, Noah?" His mother, Rachel Adams, looked at him with concern, yet she also felt a deep confusion. She couldn't fathom that a hospital, a place they had trusted so completely, could be the very place her son had endured such horrific abuse. "The doctors, the director, they treated me like an animal," Noah said, his voice choking. "Mom, I can't go on like this. I can't take it anymore." Andrew Adams, his father, stood silently in the corner of the room. His face hardened, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing, but his eyes betrayed his worry. Andrew had always been the steady figure in the family, but this time he felt like he was falling into an endless abyss. Every word Noah spoke was like a knife to their hearts. While Rachel and Andrew knew their son was suffering from severe psychological trauma after the family ordeal, they couldn't have imagined that his pain was coming from the very people they had trusted the most. Part of them wanted to deny his words because believing them meant facing a truth that was too cruel and impossible to accept. But Noah didn't stop. Each word of his was a scream in the numbness. "Mom, Dad, I can't escape from them. They always said it was treatment, but it wasn't. They used me." Rachel grabbed Noah's hand tightly, silent, but perhaps she understood. She had seen the pain in his eyes, and something within her stirred a fear that couldn't be shaken. Andrew looked at his wife, then at Noah, and decided that they couldn't wait any longer. They would trust their son, even if that meant confronting the horrific reality of what was happening at the hospital they had once trusted completely. Unable to accept their son being harmed without doing anything, they decided to take action. Andrew and Rachel knew that if they didn't stand up, they would lose their son forever, not just physically, but emotionally. They couldn't allow this brutality to continue. Rachel decided to uncover the truth. A part of her wanted to protect her son from further harm, but she also couldn't help but wonder if there was truly any way out of this situation. In her desperation, she reached out to the only person she felt she could trust from the hospital, a nurse named Jenny. Jenny had worked there for many years and had always been known for her integrity and trustworthiness. She was someone Rachel had confided in when Noah began his treatment. Jenny, who had also been a victim of abuse in the past, immediately empathized with Noah. After enduring years of brutality from those in power, she understood the pain of patients like Noah, those who couldn't speak out for fear of being dismissed or not believed. With Jenny's help, Noah's family began to gather evidence. They sought testimonies from others and examined documents and records that could prove the misconduct of Dr. Simon Hayes and Dr. Alexander Finch. Jenny quietly observed and took note of every action, even the smallest, from the director and the abusive doctors, to create solid proof. The patience of Noah's family had been tested to the utmost, but they had no other choice. They would fight, regardless of the threats from the hospital, not only to protect their son but also to safeguard other patients enduring similar suffering. They began to feel that, although the truth was painful and immense, if they didn't act now, they would never have another chance. Jenny, the nurse, could not stand by and watch Noah suffer without doing anything. Despite the truth being so hard to face, she knew she had to take action. Day by day, she quietly observed the behavior of Dr. Simon Hayes, the hospital director, and Dr. Alexander Finch, Noah's treating physician. Both were powerful figures within the hospital, and what she witnessed only made her more certain of their abuse of power. She took note of the strange actions, the meetings between them that had no medical supervision or clear purpose. She paid attention to how they treated other patients, especially Noah. Every time Dr. Finch entered Noah's examination room, Noah became fearful, his body shrinking in on itself as if bracing for an attack. The private meetings between the director and the doctor always seemed to be about treatment, but their eyes held an unmistakable contempt, a look that made Jenny shiver. Unable to bear it any longer, Jenny began finding ways to access the hospital's surveillance system. She knew it could be a dangerous move, but if she could obtain undeniable evidence, she could help Noah's family expose the dark truth unfolding in this hospital. Using her skills and relationships within the hospital, she was finally able to gain access to the cameras without anyone noticing. Important areas like the director's office and places Dr. Finch frequented were all under surveillance. After several days of tireless work, Jenny finally had the irrefutable video footage. She sat in a dark room, her eyes glued to the computer screen, watching and rewatching the footage. The first clip showed a meeting between the director and Dr. Finch, where they stood too close to each other, exchanging furtive glances and intimate gestures that Jenny couldn't ignore. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. There they were, exchanging looks full of hidden meaning, no different from secret lovers. Then came the footage of Dr. Finch entering Noah's room, closing the door, and then engaging in actions that were inexcusable. These behaviors were clearly violations, abuse, and harassment. Nothing could justify what had occurred. The footage captured Noah's heavy breathing, his pained expression as Dr. Finch touched his body, all recorded in stark clarity. These videos were undeniable. They were living proof of the horrific actions Noah had been enduring. Jenny knew that this evidence would not only help Noah escape the label of paranoia he had been forced to carry all this time, but also expose the dark truth unfolding in the hospital. She felt a heavy weight in her heart when thinking about revealing these videos, but she understood that this was the only thing that could help Noah and others like him from enduring any longer. The evidence was in hand. Now only one question remained. Could they bring it to light without paying the price for this brave act? Months passed since Noah's family began their search for the truth, and what they had hoped for was slowly becoming a reality. Thanks to the invaluable help of the nurse, who had risked gathering information and evidence, everything began to be exposed. The nurse, who had once been a victim of abuse of power herself, was determined to help Noah and his family. In the first few weeks, she quietly began recording the unusual actions of the hospital director, Dr. Simon Hayes, and Noah's treating physician, Dr. Alexander Finch. She knew that everything had to be proven with clear evidence, not just Noah's testimony, which many still considered the ramblings of a delusional patient. With boldness, she found a way to access the hospital surveillance system, where every movement in the patient rooms, meetings, and the misconduct Noah had endured could be recorded. She obtained footage that no one had expected, images that clearly captured the actions of Dr. Hayes and Dr. Finch. These clips were not only irrefutable evidence of what Noah had endured, but also the voice that would ensure he was no longer seen as delusional. As the evidence gradually accumulated, the nurse no longer worked alone. Noah's family, along with the help of a lawyer, prepared to bring all this evidence to the public. They not only wanted to see those who abused their power face justice, but also to protect other patients from the horrors unfolding in the hospital. One day, with the video footage in her hands, the nurse, along with Noah's family, walked into the police station, and no one could have guessed how quickly all the dark secrets would be revealed. The evidence from the hospital cameras, combined with her testimony, proved that the actions of Dr. Hayes and Dr. Finch were not just abuse, but a serious crime. Noah's story was no longer just a delusion, but a real case that required investigation. As the truth slowly came to light, other victims began to speak out courageously. Each one had their own story, their own wounds, but all of them shared one desire: justice must be served. After quietly observing and collecting evidence over the long weeks, Jenny knew she could no longer remain passive. She had witnessed the violent actions and abuse of power by Dr. Simon Hayes and Dr. Alexander Finch, individuals who were supposed to protect the patients but were instead their enemies. Time had passed, and she realized that she not only needed to testify for Noah, but also speak up for all the other nameless patients suffering in the dark. That day, Jenny decided to take action. She found a safe way to protect the information she had gathered. With the help of a friend within the hospital system, Jenny copied all the video footage that documented the doctors' and directors' misconduct. Clear footage that could not be denied, showing abuse and harassment. The video from the hospital's security cameras recorded the horrific scenes Noah had endured, from Dr. Hayes' scheming conversations to the unacceptable violations by Dr. Finch. Jenny began to feel she was walking a dangerous path, but she could not turn back. She had seen enough and could no longer ignore the many silent victims, the lives being ruined without anyone knowing. She decided to provide the videos and the documents she had collected to Noah's family. Noah's mother, Rachel Adams, and his father, Andrew Adams, were now ready to stand up against what was happening. After many encounters with doubt and denial from those within the hospital, they now held irrefutable evidence. They were no longer just concerned parents of a wounded child. They were fighters for justice. Jenny had become a key witness, someone who stepped forward to expose the wrongdoings of Dr. Hayes and Dr. Finch. She detailed the meetings she had witnessed, the actions Noah had endured, and most importantly, the painful moments many other patients silently suffered. She emphasized that Noah was just one of many victims, and these actions were not isolated to him but part of a corrupt system hidden under the guise of a hospital. The evidence collected from the hospital's camera system, along with Jenny's honest testimony, revealed the truth. Noah's words, once dismissed as delusions, were now confirmed as part of a serious case that needed investigation. His story was no longer the account of a wounded child, but had become a call for justice, so that no one would have to silently suffer again. With all the evidence, authorities were forced to take action. Director Dr. Hayes and Dr. Finch were immediately arrested. The police expanded the investigation, seeking out past and present patients of the hospital, inviting them to testify to shed light on the misconduct they had faced. Other hospital staff were also investigated, not only for their criminal behavior but also for their negligence in protecting the patients. With clear evidence and authentic testimonies from Jenny, Noah's family, and other patients, the investigation progressed rapidly. Director Dr. Hayes, who had always seemed powerful and untouchable, finally had to face the consequences of his actions. The secrets within the hospital were gradually uncovered, revealing the lives that had been destroyed at the hands of those whom the boy and other patients had trusted. The investigation grew increasingly tense, and the lawyers for Dr. Hayes and Dr. Finch could not deny the valuable evidence collected by the police. The videos Jenny had gathered were irrefutable proof. In the end, these criminals could not escape the truth. After a lengthy trial, both were convicted and received appropriate punishment. Dr. Hayes was permanently stripped of his medical license and faced a lengthy sentence for charges of sexual abuse and harassment. Dr. Finch was also held accountable. Not only was he disbarred, but he was also brought to trial and had to answer criminal charges for his despicable actions. Other accomplices within the hospital were also dealt with, as this healthcare system had not only been negligent but had also become a place where crimes were condoned. Ultimately, Noah, despite still carrying the psychological and physical scars, was able to begin a new life, no longer living in fear. Justice had been served, and the criminals could no longer escape the punishment they so richly deserved. Noah's story, once dismissed as the tale of a delusional victim, had now become a symbol of courage and strength in the fight for justice for the victims of abuse in the dark. After the horrific event, Noah began his arduous journey of recovery. He could never forget what he had endured, but with psychological support from specialists, he slowly began to regain trust in himself and the world around him. Although the psychological wounds still ran deep, affecting how Noah saw everything, at least he no longer felt like a lonely, powerless victim. His family, especially his mother Rachel, stood by him every step of the way, helping him get through the tough days. Noah also received support from victim support groups and friends who never gave up on him. While the road to recovery was still long, for Noah, every step along the way felt like a small victory. After Noah's case was exposed, the psychiatric hospital could no longer operate as it had before. The government and relevant authorities intervened, demanding that the hospital implement strong changes to prevent future misconduct. Stricter oversight procedures were introduced, and security cameras were installed in many key areas of the hospital to ensure that every action of the staff was monitored. Additionally, healthcare workers were required to undergo retraining on professional ethics, respect for patient rights, and protection. These reforms were not only aimed at preventing abuse, but also at helping the hospital rebuild its reputation and create a safer environment for patients. While these changes could not erase the crimes that had occurred, they were at least the first steps toward making things better. Noah's story was not just about sexual harassment, it was also a lesson about justice, protection, and the rights of the vulnerable in society. It underscored that no one, whether ill or weak, should ever be overlooked or become a victim of such atrocities.